we'll give it a minute.
Okay.
Give a little breather on everybody getting in and getting situated, and then we'll kick things off.
MJ, the bike is back.
I know, because I'm back in California. The bike that I never used, that I should have brought to Colorado with me and sold.
I'm trying to zoom in on it and see what it is.
What is it? It's a Trek.
Trek for life.
It's a Trek Lexa something road bike. It's a really nice road bike. It's a really good entry level road bike, and I have really nice pedals on it and everything. And I rode it twice, and I really want to sell it.
I love Trek. I'm a huge
somebody
Trek
should
advocator.
get some enjoyment.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great bike, but I got it. It was very aspirational. I rode twice in Joshua Tree and realized that I'm really not into road biking.
Right now is the time to sell it because there's huge demand for bikes.
I know.
And the production
I know.
back up like a year.
Really? That's good to know. I really want to sell it.
Oh, this is the high point to sell. People are
really?
Secondhand prices are through the roof.
That's good to know, because I really want to sell it as like a whole package, like get it tuned up and include like the stand and the pump and like everything. Because I'm just not gonna. Somebody should get some enjoyment out of it, and it's not gonna be me.
Doug, you'd mentioned we might have some technical difficulties. I feel like we should have more students today. It's only showing 30 students are in right now.
I re-registered. I wonder.
Yeah, it might be because we're on a new registration.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe people are trying to log in with the old one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for everyone joining us, if you've yet to change your chat settings, please make sure to change your chat settings to all panelists and attendees. For anyone joining us right now, that helps us address questions and follow the chat. As we are working to get everyone on board, and we will start the class here shortly.
Hello, France. Hello, Ireland.
And I think that Shahim has had a family emergency and won't be joining us, unfortunately.
Okay. Maybe give it another 5. See if we can get more students in. This should be everybody, right? We're not waiting on anyone else.
Jim?
Jim's trying to get in. He's having some login issues, and then, but
I think we're having
on this side, but we're ready.
Okay. For everyone who's just joining us or just getting into the chat, please make sure to change your chat settings to all panelists and attendees. That helps us address our questions. To everyone who's watching on YouTube, please make sure to address your questions as well. We follow along on the YouTube chat. And if you've yet to sign up, please follow and like our YouTube page. That helps you stay up to date with all of our webinars that are accessible and future classes and all that good stuff. We hope that everyone had an incredible spring break, their respective spring break. I know we enjoyed it, but we are stoked to be back for another series as we put a spotlight on lighting. And for all of our students who've been here with us from the beginning, I pass it over to Henry to introduce our special guest and get the class started. And we're happy to be back. Henry.
Thanks, Mark. I am very happy to be back. I'm coming to you from Third Encore right now. So the live events industry is a service-based industry, but we are also masters at creating experiences in a multitude of ways. So when you start to look at the basics of how we do this, we have to start by asking, how do people experience things? Through 5 human senses that most people have: taste, touch, smell, hearing, and sight. So humans perceive up to 80% of our impressions by means of light. So when it comes to designing a concert for the designing a concert, the job of pairing something to look at that goes along with music that we're hearing is the experience that we're here to create for the artist. And hopefully a lot of people will pay money to see it. Our focus in a Spotlight On series is one department at a time. Today, we are going to talk with two amazing individuals that have mastered the art of manipulating lighting to evoke an emotion out of you. We're going to zoom in on what a lighting crew looks like, a day in the life, where to get started, and where you can go with the skills learned. So without further ado, let's welcome today's guests, three amazing individuals that need no introduction, but we're going to give you one anyways. So let's go around the screen and give a brief intro of yourselves, starting with Sooner.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Sooner Routhier, production designer, lighting designer, not a guitar player. This is my husband's office that I'm stealing for the day. So don't be fooled, I'm not that cool.
So Sooner, give me a quick intro.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
Tell us about yourself.
Tell me
Oh,
about
okay.
what you've done.
30-second intro. Basically, I live in Nashville. I'm from Northern Vermont, and I design shows. So I design all the scenic, the lighting, the video, the staging, sometimes pyro, special effects, and also deal with artists and their show flow, their show direction. Yeah, started as a lighting designer, and now I do the full thing.
Amazing, amazing. Dave, welcome to TM1.
Well,
Mr. Singleton,
you.
tell me about yourself.
so I'm originally from the UK. I now live in Brooklyn, New York. Started the industry about 15 years ago, and basically got into it from my dad. My dad used to work for the BBC in the UK. Kind of put me on the track really early on, wanting to get into something to do with production. I then volunteered at like a local theater, went to college to study theatrical production, and that's where they kind of taught me how to light, dance, theater, all that kind of stuff. Then transposed over into the live touring world. I've also worked for a few different vendors across the years. Now I'm here.
Adrian.
So we're going to talk a little bit about how you guys got into the business as we sail into this a bit. How does one get into lighting? Everyone wants to know. How do you become a show designer? You know, how do you become a lighting director? And as we break down this session, we're going to break it all apart and really take a deeper dive. And we're really happy to have you guys. So I will start with you, Dave. Can you tell me and the rest of us how we get into this business?
I think it's different for everybody, but I think for me it was definitely a whole series of events that like led up to this point. I got lots of experience from different areas. Like I said, I originally started in theater, which kind of gave me a really good backbone for lighting and learning how to light shows, light people, and it's a very different world, I would say, probably to like live touring, but you can carry a lot of those skills through. So from that, you just kind of meet new people, just kind of connect with new people. I worked for a few vendors that kind of put me in a good position to do some touring work, and then kind of by accident ended up on the road. I don't even know how I got there fully, but like a friend of mine sort of said, "Oh, I've got this artist that needs a lighting designer. Do you want to go out and do it?" It's an EDM artist, never lit an EDM show, never done anything like that before in my life, and just threw myself at it and went, "Yeah, okay, I can do that." And since then, it's every new artist I work with is either like off the back of another tour. They might be support or something like that. Or, Mark introduced me to one of my current new clients, and that also helped. I don't know. It's like as people get to know you better, you meet new people, you get a reputation, you work with new people.
Okay. Awesome. Hey, Sooner.
Hi.
Nice to have you.
Thanks.
Welcome. So can you tell us a little bit about your trajectory? How you started and how you came up?
For sure. I mean, similar, like a series of events kind of led me to where I am now. I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Vermont, so it was really difficult to get into the business. There wasn't like a quick track or anything. And it wasn't like I knew anybody in the business that I could lean on to help me network into it. I just went to my first concert when I was 18 and realized that that's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And in school, when I went to college, the very first semester I was there, we had like a fall concert that needed lighting and audio support because the band wasn't carrying their own gear. Most bands carry their own gear. At least a lot of us that work at this level, we rent it from vendors. But this artist in particular wasn't. So I latched on to the guy that was running lights. And because I was a nerd and I knew everything about the lighting gel book, which young people might not even know what a lighting gel is, but there's colored gels that go in front of a par can or a Lico, and they make the color come out of the light, right? There's more highly technical physical things that happen there. But anyway, I digress. I knew all the gel colors. He labeled his console with gel numbers instead of RGB. It said Roscoe 27, L139, R80. When he asked me to run the console and he said, pull up the red fader, and I pulled up the one that said R27, he kind of was like, yeah, how does this person know these things? And I said, well, this is what I want to do, and I want to tag along. So I went for it and drove 3.5, 4 hours down to Boston to the next show he was doing the following weekend. And I said, okay, what's the next one? And every weekend I would just go down from Vermont to the Boston area, and I would just work shows as an intern. I was an intern at that point. And so just like putting in the work and the dedication, I wasn't like sitting behind the lighting console at these shows. I was in the warehouse sorting gels and fixing cables and cleaning faders and soldering things. Like that's what I was doing. At the shows, I was running the feeder, the power feeder that connects the big dimmer racks and distor racks to the main disconnect in the building so you can get power to the lights. That's what I was doing. I wasn't running the console. I wasn't programming. So basically from there, I just made sure that I networked as much as I could with people that I knew were doing this job already. So when another lighting designer came in with a band, I would always make sure to like stay in contact with that person. Same thing with the production managers, stage managers. And I always just made sure that I asked questions appropriately and at the right time, like read the room and like figure out when to ask the right questions. And they remember you for being that like kind of go-getter person, but not the annoying go-getter person. And that was it, like networking. That's the best way to do it. From there, it just grew into my first tour. And then my first tour became 15 years of touring. And then 15 years of touring became 23 years of touring and designing. So I just aged myself, guys. I didn't want to do that. Don't look at the bags.
Can't see them on Zoom.
Perfect.
In this business, it's the mileage we do, not the year.
Right. Exactly.
What that is right now. Anyway.
Thank you, guys. All right, over to you, Mark.
Nice. Sooner, continuing the conversation, let's talk a little bit about the variances of the terminology of a lighting designer. We hear the terms lighting designer, lighting director, operator a lot. Can you tell us the difference between the three?
Yeah, for sure. So a lighting designer typically works directly with a creative team, management team, directly with the artist. And, it differs between camps, right? So sometimes if you're a lighting designer, you're working directly with the artist and making the artist's vision come true. Sometimes the artist is a little bit more incognito. So you're working with a creative director or even the manager, right? And you're making those dreams come true. So through the communication lines. So essentially a designer will work directly with the creative team or the artist to decide what fixtures, decide the overall look of the show, really collaborate. And this is done months, hopefully months, should be months in advance of a tour or a show happening. The designer will draw out the technical plots or work with a team to help draw the technical plots, communicate the ideas and the creative vision to all of the tech team, through like a crew chief or whatever. So it all kind of filters down. So the designer would end up basically being in charge of the overall creative vision of that show, and communicate through renders and technical plots. The lighting director is the person that goes onto the tour that is in charge of making sure that that vision not only continues, but also expands and grows, right? It's a little baby that you want to grow. It's not like a stagnant thing, because there's going to be notes, there's going to be changes in the vision. So the lighting director basically keeps in mind everything that the designer wants to portray on a show, but also communicates the changes that are necessary to make it happen, like communicates effectively between the designer and the artist of what's going on, and also implements those changes. So on a daily basis, that lighting director will go in, focus the lights, make sure everything's working, adjust notes in the console, operate the show, call the spotlights, or even operate the spotlights if we're using one of the fancy robotic ones that they have these days, the video games basically. The lighting operator is typically somebody who is behind the console all day and doesn't have quite as much responsibility. I would say more often than not, I'm sorry, my email is going off. I would say more often than not, the lighting, it's usually a lighting director on a tour. I wouldn't say that it's just an operator. Usually it's almost always a lighting director. Dave, have you ever seen a lighting director and an operator before?
Nope. Not one of mine.
I feel like I've seen, just one or the other. Yeah.
I have.
Yeah?
Yeah. Only in times when, unique situation, if the lighting designer director is potentially on video and content, then sometimes they need an operator. They're there, but they're just feeding some different aspect of content. That's the only time, but it happens, that happens with two of my clients, actually.
Wow, impressive.
Operator occasionally has to come and do a thing.
Nice.
That's super, super important. And thanks for breaking that down for us sooner. I'm going to pass it over to Jim, talk with Dave.
Hey guys, nice to see y'all. Actually, I have a confession to make. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but I actually got my start as an LD.
I was gonna say.
And I actually was the lighting LD for Paula Cole. I was Stain's first LD, and also Machine Head, who our friend Rob Koenig took over as tour manager LD from On Me. Who, those of you who don't know, Rob Koenig is now LD for Metallica and Guns N' Roses, among many other people. Is a good friend of mine, but we both started out in the business together, and we're one of the few tour managers / LD combos that were in the business at that time. So Dave, let's go into a lightning round with you. Okay. I'm going to say the name of some positions, and you tell me what they are.
Sure.
L1 or lighting crew chief.
So they are, when you go out on the road, they are someone who normally will be responsible for all the gear that's going in the air. They'll be responsible for loading in your show. Crew chief will liaise with all the different departments on your behalf. They will deal with stagehands for you, things like that, to make sure that the package that you're taking with you will get up in the air or on the floor, however it may be.
In a sense, to our students, the L1 in lighting would be kind of like the A1 would be in audio. It's kind of their version of it. Next would be L2, L3, L4.
For me, they're terms that like, they have different meanings as you go through different camps, but ultimately it's just kind of like a way of giving different people different responsibilities. And it can vary a lot from tour to tour, but ultimately they work underneath the crew chief or underneath the L1. Again, they'll just handle different sections of the show, have different responsibilities to get it up and running.
And what is a dimmer tech? And I guess for those that don't know, what are dimmers? So
dimmers date back to like the old school way of doing things, I should say, although I still love using them. So you used to have tungsten fixtures, like little filament light bulbs, and the dimmers were required to be able to turn them on and off, basically.
And where do dimmers live?
Wherever you can fit them nowadays.
Dimmer Beach. Dimmer Beach.
No, they live in Dimmer Beach. Yeah. So dimmers, dimmer tech will live in Dimmer Beach, normally in a hammock, and they are basically responsible.
If all's going well, he's in a hammock.
Yeah, if all's going well.
Or he's
Otherwise,
hovering over a pile of wires.
running around sweating.
Right. If all goes well, he's in a hammock.
But yeah, they're responsible basically for making sure your show is running, your show is turned on, powered on. And nowadays, when you're in the realms of lots of moving lights and new technology, there's a lot of responsibility there, because there's a lot of things that need to have power and stay powered throughout the show, which is always fun. So yeah, they live off the side of the stage somewhere.
And next is systems tech.
So systems tech, depending on the level of tour you're going to, again, nowadays, there's a lot of technology involved. There's a lot of network stuff involved. And a systems tech primarily will look after like all the networking side of things, all of the data distribution to the lights. Nowadays, you have to give them power and you have to tell them what to do. So they will sort of handle all the back end of that and make sure that runs smoothly throughout the show.
Spot Up,
my favorite people. So they can vary.
Can you explain why they're your favorite people too?
Sometimes, oh wow. Sometimes without them, you're really lost. Sometimes I'd rather be without them. So they are primarily, they can be anybody. They can be members of the crew. They could be the drivers. They could be local crew, local stagehands, and they operate the big spotlights, which normally follow spot the talent. They normally follow talent around the stage. They normally receive instruction from the LD, lighting director, or operator, depending on the show. And yeah, they point big lights around the place.
House electrician.
Another favorite person. They are required to make the dimmer tech's life happy. So they basically provide power to your touring show, and they're quite important because they're ultimately responsible for the venue side of things. Anything you bring in is kind of like your problem. Anything they're providing you with to get your like feeder cables to the stage, things like that, will go through a house electrician. And yeah, they'll also know things about like their venue. They'll know all the quirky stuff. They'll know if they have like architectural lighting in the venue, things like that. They'll help you get tied into all of that good stuff.
And a house LD.
Very important for theater touring. So normally, you don't normally see them for like arena level shows, but like for theaters, things like that, there'll always be a house LD. They are normally the people who will run shows just in house. If there's no touring LDs, if they have a house rig, they'll look after all of those, and they're attached to the venue. They are also the people that will help you get situated as an operator or as a designer. They'll help you with everything from focusing lights right the way through to just making sure your day's good, really.
And last question is, why is it so important for lighting to work closely together with the house lighting team, even more than any other department?
So every venue is different. And I think every time you take a touring show into a venue, you're manipulating it in some way to fit that space. There's a little phrase that a lot of people use, which is called shoehorning a show in. And that's normally when you get like a large show and you're trying to squeeze it into a very small space. So like working with a house team is crucial for that. They know their venue, they know their space. They can tell you what will work, what won't work. And if you work with them and you listen to them, they'll help you achieve everything you need to do.
Excellent, thank you. And Sooner, just to age me, I got out of lighting when moving lights came into play. I was when park hands went from park hands to moving lights. That's when I left the lighting world. So that ages me quite a bit. So
isn't that like 1974 or something?
Oh man,
that's about right. Yeah, I'm that old.
Does anybody know that actually when the first moving lights came into play?
1981. Genesis.
81, Genesis
Yeah.
tour, right?
Fairlight.
Yeah.
Very light.
I think an important thing to mention at this point is that in the same way that we described in our audio and other episodes, the structure of each tour is different. So these are standard positions, particularly in arena and bigger size shows. When you're starting out on your first tour, you may not even be, if you're a tour manager with a new artist, you may not even have an LD, lighting director on your tour, and you may be reliant on in-house lighting engineers, which, at that point, you can come to them with some notes, and that can be a very delicate conversation to have. You can give some suggestions and moods, and I would say tread carefully and be as polite as possible. And then you may get, you might experience everything from a lighting engineer who has been proactive and researched your album and know every song and have cue points, through to somebody who is disinterested at best. So, that's why we carry lighting engineers, for consistency. But when you're starting out as a tour manager, you can be at the behest of whoever is working your show that night. So just be prepared for that. And then, what Dave just broke down really well for us is the top tier, but there is every different, there are a variety of different setups on tour. You may, if you are traveling with one lighting person, they're going to be working really closely with the in-house team, versus on an arena tour, everybody is on your team. So those are great broad brushstrokes. I wanted to move on and ask Sooner and Dave, but starting with Sooner. I've kind of been, all the way through my career, I've been working with this personal idea that as soon as I encounter a lighting engineer who's come from the theater world, that I'm going to be fine, that the tour is going to be fine, because I find, and this is no, slight on anyone who didn't come that way into their career, but I feel like there's a creativity and a sympathetic approach to lighting that doesn't overwhelm the stage or the artist. And I just find it brings a really creative approach to stage lighting. What are your thoughts on that? And what have you taken from non-rock and roll touring that, helps you today when you're designing?
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, I was in musical theater, and then I went to dance in high school. I was actually really bad at dance, so I think my dance instructor just gently nudged me to the lighting, because these shoulders that keep popping up. Anyway, so I learned a lot about lighting the body through modern dance, and I think that, I feel like maybe it's just a subtlety that you learn, just because you have, we're really, really lucky, but hundreds of lights in a rig doesn't mean they all have to be on at the same time doing stuff. And I feel like just taking a theatrical approach of using only what you need when you need it kind of creates this subtlety to a rock and roll or a pop lighting show or hip hop, whatever you want to call it. And also it teaches you, like you said, it teaches you how to light skin tones properly, and actually make sure that your artist is popping out on stage instead of fading into the background, or the audience's eyes aren't blinded the entire time by strobing, because you need to see the people on stage. It's not just about your self-important goals of lighting a show.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Dave, can I pass that question over to you as well?
Yeah, same. I think coming from theater and coming from lighting dance and things, one of the things it really does teach you is lighting the body, and how bodies move. And it kind of gave me the grounding of lighting positions as well, really learning how angles play, how intensities are so important. And kind of, as Suna was just saying, you see a lot where there's like every light's just on 100% nowadays, and it's like, well, no, actually, like if you really start to play with intensities, you can create some really interesting looks and feels. And it also teaches you about all of the little tools coming from theater. So gobos, for example, which are like the little you used to put them into generic lights. They're like the little metal stencils almost, which like project patterns everywhere. Nowadays you'll see them in moving lights. It's a lot easier to play with them nowadays, but yeah, so it kind of teaches you a lot about how to actually physically light people. And I feel like coming from theater also really helped me transition into knowing how to light things for camera as well. Because even on a like a festival stage, for example, if you have IMAX screens and things like that, if you actually want your artist to be seen on those screens, you do still need to pay attention to like lighting them properly. Sometimes artists don't want to be seen, it's fine, but you know, if you want them to be seen and you want that to look good, then you need to light them properly. And another big one coming from the theater world is color temperatures. It's one of the most important things I think in lighting. And theater really taught me a lot about the use of color temperature, and just how that can impact how somebody looks, because you can really quickly make someone look very ill, especially on camera. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point and an important point. I've been with artists who are looking at a design or something that is, you know, their show, and they love the overall creative, but they're asking, but where am I? This is great, but where am I in all of this? And I think perhaps there is the artist gets forgotten about it in some designs, going for the biggest, most, you know, max version of everything. So yeah.
Can I say something? I love that you pointed out that there's the starting in theater gives you a very it's the most approachable level to get your hands on the gear and to start, you know, learning about instruments, whether it's the old stuff like park hands and lecos. You still got to know that. Even if you're not going to be a designer in this business, you should still know what they mean when they say pull a shutter or, you know, run this 3-pin across the stage. You got to know these cables and things, even if you're not going to be in lighting. So this is one of the most approachable places to kind of get into the industry. We've mentioned before, if you're working in local unions or your local venue, in one way or another, you're going to touch lighting. It's one of the biggest things we do, whether you start off in the day with that or end. Everyone kind of ends up in the lighting department. So get in there. And if you're just coming up to our students, go to lighting, learn a few things, and because everybody should know the basics of it. So I love that. Yeah, like you said, you learn about not just the lighting people, but how to run cables, how to lift some heavy shit, where not to put your fingers.
Learn how to pack a truck too, because then you figure out how much stuff you can't take on tour with you.
Exactly.
Learn how to direct people. That's a big one. Direct and work at the same time. You can multitask like that. Woo.
For sure.
Absolutely. That's a big point. Yeah.
That learning how to pack a truck is key, because if a design is built and it does not fit in your mode of transport, that does, you know, and going up to the next size of transport is not within your budget, then you have a major problem on your hands.
I actually, I'll confess to the fact that I did a tour not so long ago as well, where they ended up actually having to put lights in bunks on the bus because we were in a bus and trailer tour and there was just not enough space. So yeah, they weren't junk bunks, they were lighting bunks. So yeah, you really have to pay attention to what your transport is.
It's been some really nice lights.
They were well looked after. Had a little pillow.
There's so many jokes there. There really is so many jokes. We're not going to digress, but imagine how if we were in the production office, we could spend 20 minutes riffing jokes just on lighting fixtures having bunks. So, you know, interesting, because there's quite a few theater kids on this call. and Jim came from lighting, which I didn't realize that you were an LD for so many. I knew you came from the lighting world, though. That's so fascinating. We talked to, how being in theater taught you guys how to light bodies and light movement differently. How do you now light different genres of music or, different types of shows? Sooner, is there a difference between how you would approach doing lighting design for Motley Crue versus The Weeknd?
Absolutely. Yeah. 100,000%. I mean, you have to like listen to the music and understand what you're lighting, right? So like, when I designed Motley Crue, back in 2015, I think it was, it's a junkyard, right? Like Motley Crue's messy. It's a rock show. There's tons of pyro. It can't be clean. If it's clean and like really modern arty, like an art installation, it doesn't work for them. It doesn't look right because it's a gritty, heavy metal, old school rock band. And then, lighting The Weeknd is a very different thing because like I was working with Ez Devlin. She was the scenic designer, production designer for it. So I was lighting her art installations. She had this huge, massive flying ship above the stage that kind of moved and changed positioning. And it had to look like a modern art installation because of the nature of the scenic and the nature of the music. When you listen to his music, it's very obviously there's just so many little subtle things in there you have to hit. So when you look at the lighting plots, the technical drawings for each of those shows, they're very, very, very different. So there's a key on each lighting plot that has little symbols on it, and each little symbol represents a different type of light or a different type of effect or whatever is in the show. So like you'll have, this is a very rudimentary version, but if you have like a star that represents a moving light, then a square that represents a park hand, then whatever. The symbols on a lighting plot actually look like little lights. They all look like little two-dimensional lights. So the key for the Motley Crue plots probably had 20 different lighting fixtures in there because like when you turn them on and you do different things, you've got different beam shapes and different like things flare out the camera or your eyes a little bit different. There's like sharp beams, but then there's really splotchy things. And when you put them all together, it looks messy, but it's supposed to. Then you look at the Weeknd plot, and I think there was like 2 or 3. So it was just 300 of one type of light and 50 of another type of light, right? Like it was a massive amount of the same type of lights because when you turn them all on and you have them all doing the same beams, it looks like a clean palette. It looks like a clean piece. Like you could put a picture frame in front of your eyeballs and you would see like a shape and you could say, that's the X shape. Is very like clearly defined by the same type of fixture. Yeah.
That was very interesting. That was super interesting to me. Thank you so much for that.
We like to play with shapes. We like to play with shapes.
And Dave, how do you approach lighting your different types of music that you work with, different genres?
Research first and foremost. You have to know your artist. You have to know what they want to do and what they want to achieve. And sometimes you'll go to an artist and they'll look at you and say, I have no idea. I don't know what I want to do. I have no vision. Sometimes you go to them and they will tell you exactly what they want at every precise moment of the show. So it can be an interesting thing to play with. A lot of artists as well have a creative director who sometimes can be a friend, sometimes can be someone that they're employing, who really understands kind of like their brand, their vision for that whole album cycle. And I think it's also kind of important to note that for different artists, they can do a whole album cycle and kind of like want to change the aesthetic. They can really want to do something completely different. So a lot of research is first and foremost how I do things. And then once you kind of get the basis of a design, go through it. I try and pre-visualize a lot of stuff as well, so the artist can see it, like on a 3D computer setting. They'll give you a ton of feedback, and then it's down to rehearsals and actually shaping. A lot of stuff for me happens in rehearsals. I I feel like I get the most, like there's only so much you can do in a 3D space prior to a tour, but when you actually get the rig in front of you, you can see how things look. So much normally changes during rehearsals. We've actually been there before where you get into rehearsals and you're like, right, we're going to scrap this whole song, completely redo it because we hate it. It just doesn't work. So yeah, it really is like a work in progress from the beginning. You go in with like a few basic ideas and then it just evolves. Yeah. We've also had moments in the past, I think most people have had this, where you do something, you're really proud of it. You really like that idea, that vision, and then an artist will just look at it and go, no. And you're like, thanks. Great. What do you want to do? So yeah, it's just an evolving process, and it changes on the road too. Especially when you're going from venue to venue, you might be in rehearsals and you might look at a whole concept, a whole idea for a song, and then be like, this just does not work. Like most of the venues we're in, a low ceiling, you're bouncing light off the ceiling too much or something like that, and it's just horrible. So you have to change it up, mix it up.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Over to you, Jim, talking about day-to-day.
All right, Sooner, for you, when you're out on tour as an LD, what generally does a day look like on tour from load in to load out?
So I have not toured for a while, so I might be a little dated in this, but I think that it's pretty much the same. So basically, the last tour I did was Bon Jovi. The big one would have been 2013. So on that tour, that's a pretty typical tour day, I would say. I was pretty spoiled on that one. So I had a systems tech that would be out front of house for me, and he would build all of front of house for me so I could walk in, sit at the board, and be ready to go. Basically, my day consisted of, I'm just going to start with the fun stuff anyway, because honestly, the tour bus side of things is really my favorite part of the job. So you get to sleep in a bunk, and in that bunk, you're really cozy because you got the nose of the road rumbling underneath you. Anyway, I would get up, go inside, grab some coffee, breakfast, shower in the big old locker rooms. Always have somebody to guard that thing for me. And then I'd get to go out to front of house. And at front of house, the lighting stations was already set up. So I would sit down at the console and read the room and make sure, look around, see how we're doing. Like, is the rig in the air? Is our stuff at trim? Are there people still in the lighting trusses doing any sort of work? Are there riggers or audio techs or video techs in the air doing any sort of work? If I saw that everybody was sort of settled, I would ring the stage manager and say, hey man, I need house lights out. And then we would turn the house to half so that I could start focusing the rig. On Bon Jovi, I probably had 50 or 60 focuses to do. So I would do all of those within a couple hours. And then I always gave myself notes during the show. So the night before, so the systems tech would always be on headset with me, and he would take all the notes down. So I would spend like an hour fixing cues, adjusting cues. If there are any songs that were added to any songs that were added to the set list that, or maybe might be added to the set list, I would program those quickly so I had them ready. Band would come up on stage, do sound check. I would operate lights during that sound check. And either before that sound check or after that sound check, I would meter spotlights. So something that's very important these days is everything is on video, whether or not it's an actual camera or it's this, you are constantly lighting for camera. It doesn't matter what show. You could be in a club, you can be in a theater, you can be in an amphitheater, you can be outside on a tiny little stage, cardboard background in front of your neighbor's house. That show's on camera on Instagram. So I always made sure that I took my light meter, went on stage, had the house electrician and the house LD, whoever's there in charge at the arena, would get up onto each spotlight, and through headset, we would meter all the spotlights, make sure that they're the right color temperature, and set the level according to what works best with the show. There's a really terrible picture of me floating around trying to talk through this online someplace. If you find it, you can send it to me. It'd be really funny. I challenge you to find this picture. Anyway, so went out front after that, and then like just made sure everything was set. And then by then, like the opening act was probably getting on stage to set up their gear. So the opening act LD would come out. The system tech would work with the opening act LD. I would leave them to do what they needed to do and not bother them, and make sure that they had the appropriate time they needed to make their show look good, because it's not always just about you. And then go backstage, have dinner, and get ready for the show. I would always call house lights, which is always the most exciting part of the job, because you've got a full arena of like 25, 30,000 people. And I'm like getting chills thinking about it, guys. I can't wait to do it again. So you'll be sitting at the console, like ready to go. And you got like this adrenaline pumping through because you've got all these people and the audience. When it's a stadium show, it's even crazier. And so you're sitting on headset and you get the radio call from the stage manager or the production manager that says, all right, house lights go. And you call house lights go to the house electrician, and they kill all the lights and everybody loses their mind. And then you go for it. And then you start pushing buttons in time with the music. Beep, boop, boop. Or if it's time code, all the little beep boops are happening through a little cable that's in the console, and it just does its thing and it's boring. And if you're listening on headset to an LD who is calling spotlights, like traditional spotlights, it kind of sounds like mission control, because you're calling all these guys and girls and people who have like these big lighting instruments that are following the musicians around the stage. And you have to tell them where to go and when to turn on and when to turn off. And you have to anticipate cues, because if you call it directly on a beat, it's going to be late, because you have to think of human factor. So anyway, run the show ends, pack up console, go to the bus, and drink wine. That's my day.
Excellent.
That's awesome.
That is a great day.
The beep
What does it
boops.
look like for you on festivals with an EDM artist, which is my role? I just got done doing Ubby Dubby last night, so if I'm a little
wow.
I spent the weekend in Dallas doing an EDM show with starting with the programming at 12:30 a.m. to doing the site inspection. Yeah, for my day starting. So tell us about that.
Yeah, slightly different. So normally on an EDM festival or something, most EDM artists generally get back-to-back bookings. So we normally send somebody ahead to go and pre-program a show. They'll do an overnight slot after the festival's closed. And it's normally in the early hours of the morning. It's freezing cold, it's raining. And they'll basically preset all the lights for you. They know roughly what you're looking for, hopefully, and they'll get your show ready for you. So for me, I would be coming from a previous night's show, often either flying straight after the show or flying early morning. We come in, they will deliver me files, which I can then check over, do the work I need to do to them to make the show happen. But you're kind of doing it blind, because you haven't seen what they've seen the night before. And normally this is all done by email. You don't ever get to sit down face to face with them where they remember half the information they need to give you. And then we would basically go onto site. Some festivals, if they're a big festival, they normally will set up a 3D pre-visualization suite for you. So you can kind of get a feel for what the show is going to be like, and also do any other work that you need to do to the show. So like one of the shows I do is fully time coded. So I like to sit there and like run a couple of songs, and I'll see it, and I'll really quickly figure out if there's, something's gone wrong with their programming. Or more often than not, the 3D models that they make aren't actually accurate. So you kind of have to use a bit of judgment to figure that out. But then, yeah, you go into a show, and normally, again, in like the EDM world, you only get a really, really short changeover. It's not like a lot of like band slots on festivals where you might get 30 minutes or something like that. On an EDM show, it's 60 seconds you're in. It can be really fast. And normally loading a show file depending on the size of your show file, it can be big. So that takes you 60 seconds. So you don't get any time to like look at stuff. You just have to have the faith of the person who's programmed for you the night before. You go into the show, you do your show, then go to the dressing room, go and get on a plane, go do it all again. Sometimes, more often than not, if you're in EDM, they also do more than one show a day. So you can do a lot of traveling around like that as well. So it'd be hop on the plane, go to the next show.
Welcome to my world. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that just hit me super hard. Just having PTSD from living in that schedule for a long time. Man,
Yeah.
I feel it.
Bless you guys.
It's like when they're like, oh, today we only have 3 shows. Then you're like, oh, okay, great, let's go.
Yeah, and I don't know, but like typically EDM, like we don't go to work till like 10 p.m. You know, especially if you're a headliner, you are on after midnight, and so the hours are very nocturnal.
It's normally they normally do that, and then they generally you get like after parties a lot as well, where they're a little informal. Like you normally not so much of an issue, but you still normally go and do them, and that can be you just get straight in a car straight after your set at the festival, straight to a club, straight into another show. Yeah, it can be
David,
fun.
I did Diplo in Major Lasers, so no one works harder than Diplo does. Diplo will do shows every 10 minutes if he's given the opportunity to do it. That guy's work ethic is like unbelievable, and he goes through people just because no one can keep up with him. It's insane.
So I do a lot of their programming, and I do quite a lot of shows for them as well. And we normally, Kyle. Kyle's a really good guy. Darius Medina looks after me now, but they
Funky Cold in my world he's called. He's funky cold. That's what we call Darius.
They're crazy. I mean, Diplo I think do upwards of 200 shows a year.
Yeah.
So he's not afraid of.
And in like he'll do China, Pakistan, Spain, all back-to-back days. Yeah, like no rhyme or reason. Just where if he gets invited, he'll go. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Sooner, one more for you. As a designer, you may not be the first be there for the tour and day to day. But what does the day on tour look like for you as a designer? Are you on call? Do you go out in the first few days to make sure it all is well? What's the plan there?
Yeah, so all of my stuff is done pretty much ahead of time. Like I'm working on a couple tours right now that start over a year from now. So usually my work is up front. So my main time on tour is spent in rehearsals. So I like to think that when I'm actually doing this properly and in the right like state of our industry, I'm in a constant perpetual state of rehearsals and pre-production, which is kind of the most challenging part for like a rock or pop tour. EDM sounds way more challenging than any rehearsal period I've ever been through in my life. So I bow down to Dave for this one. But essentially, like in rehearsals, it gets pretty exhausting because I have to be there when the artist is there rehearsing. So sometimes I get like 4 hours of sleep a night. So I'll go in for rehearsals around 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, be there with the artists to show them what we're doing. I might even operate for the director or the programmer because I might do it so they can get a little bit more sleep. And then they will come in like probably once like rehearsals are done around 8, 9 o'clock at night, usually. I end up staying up all night long until 7 or 8 in the morning, programming with the programming team and getting all the cues nailed down. And I try to program, but I'm getting to the point where I need to hire people at this because sometimes like if I'm in charge of like the full stage, like the scenic and the video and all that stuff, my head just goes in too many places and I can't concentrate enough on just the lighting side of things. So lighting suffers. And so I have to take my hands off of that patient for a bit. So yeah, you don't sleep. And then you go through, you do the rehearsals, I stay through the first or even the second show, and then I go home and go to the next one. And I'm just always on call. Like when things need to change, like I'm ready to talk about it. If I need to even program a song and then send the file back, like I'll program it here in Nashville or wherever I happen to be and send the file back out to the tour for them to use. We've done that several times. And then as any large scale tour or even smaller scale tour, whatever, goes through its full run, you know, you're going to go between different countries. So you're going to do the North America run, you're going to do the Europe run, you're going to come back, you're going to do a shed run, you're going to do promo tour all before it. So there's constantly changes to the design that happen throughout that process. So I'm always there with the team to like change it up and send out new documents.
Thank you, Sooner. You know, that ties in well with a question we have from one of our students. Adam Alanti asked, would you mind speaking on working with multiple artists at once and how to combat creative fatigue or just fatigue itself? How do you deal with all that?
I actually function better at a certain level of crazy. So I actually have finally found like my stride in the past 2 weeks because I've got a few things going on in the production world. I own a home staging company here in town because why not? I've got some construction going on at my house, which is why I'm in this office. So I'm actually at my favorite level right now, which is having 5 or 6 projects going on at the same time. And it's just a juggling match, right? It's about being organized. It's about communicating effectively. And it is about having the right people in place in the right positions, people that you know and you trust that can do a job. For example, throughout this entire conversation, I've been getting a lot of emergency messages about changing a design last minute. And through that process, my favorite nerd that I like to activate on any project I ever have is currently adjusting all of it according to what he knows I would want to do anyway. So when I get off this call, I can quickly look at what he's done and say, that's perfect. And then we're good to go. But it's because I have worked with this guy for like 4 or 5 years at this point. He knows me, he knows what I need, he gets it done. So it's really like working with several artists at once is actually pretty fun. Like I love when I have a bunch of different genres going. So like last year I had like Justin Moore, which is a little country artist here out of Nashville. I had the Lumineers going out. Kiss had just launched on the road, so that was going. And we had some stuff with Alessia Cara. So I had rock, alternative, country, and I don't know, pop all together. And it's actually easier to create when there's that many different genres because they're all so different that you're just like pulling the inspiration from so many different places instead of just like going out there and being like, oh my God, I have 5 hip hop artists and they all look the same, right? So I guess that doesn't really explain the process, but yeah, I mean, you just do your research, like Dave said earlier, on each artist and make sure that it's as different from the next thing that you've done. And you're designing a bespoke show for each artist because they are also different in nature.
Yeah, I think you hit it as well. I think it's a common theme through a lot of us that we maybe in this industry we're a type that thrives on the pressure and stress sometimes, but I know I'm the same way. But you know what, no matter how many things you're juggling, please take the time to fill your cup. Mental health first, right? So let's talk about now you've designed an amazing show for, say, arena tour. It's gone out, it's been touring for months, and it's perfect as it is. The lighting, plot, everything has been designed for that show, and it's going like clockwork. But then we hit a festival, and now this festival rig is completely different from your rig. And for obvious reasons, festivals don't always, you can't just always bring your entire touring rig into a festival. But I want to talk about how you guys deal with taking a touring show that you've designed to a T, but then having to adapt it to a completely different rig and pull off the same cues, the same look and feel and emotion that artist is expecting to have for that show. David, tell me, where do you start with something like that? Is it that you know you're going into it, or is it and you want to create a different festival look, or is it something that's sort of you have to treat them individually and how you handle these?
Yeah, I mean, each day can be completely different. So like I sit in like a weird area where like an EDM rig, an EDM show will look completely different to say like a main stage Bonnaroo or something like that. But some of the artists I work with can do both. And so like being able to translate the show between all of those as well is a little challenge in itself, just within festivals. But it's kind of like, once you've like established the vision, once you've established what you want to do with the show, it's figuring out ways in that new setting how you can get the most out of your show and how you can make stuff happen. And I mean, sometimes, you know, I've completely reprogrammed a song just to suit. You keep the timing the same, you keep the cues the same, but you have to really change your approach. And I think it's also like, it's really important when you're working with an artist, they fully know when something's different. A lot of artists will pull you up on it, or they will mention something as well if they feel weird or they feel out of place. So you kind of have to really create that mood for them as well.
Yeah, it's an amazing skill our artists have of being sort of omnipotent, of being on stage and not being able to see any of those lights, but they can tell if that one little light that's usually right here is not there or is now coming from here. That could mean a call to the principal's office after show. You know, it's funny how they pick up on that. And some artists, cool, they don't care, but some shows it does matter. The details do matter. So that's really challenging thing for you guys that I think is fascinating, that you know, you need that in a lighting designer. If you're going from tours into festival, that's a huge skill to have.
I think you have to be adaptive. And I think also I do quite a lot of work where I work for other designers too. And it doesn't matter necessarily what you would do for them. Like, so if I go and pre-program a show for them, like on an overnight programming slot or something, it doesn't matter what I would do. It's what they want. And you have to be adaptive enough to think as someone else as well. And that could be your artist. You know, you have to think what they want, what they're going to need. So like I was telling you guys yesterday that I did a festival, fully time-coded show, and we built into the beginning of the show a big hit, a big white light hit. And that was the way for the artist to know that everything was fine, everything was running okay, and his show was going to be great. And we did one show where that didn't happen, and it completely threw us a performance. So it's kind of like you have to know. I don't know. You have to be able to be adaptive and think outside the box a lot.
I was just sitting here thinking, you guys, it's when you underestimate what you think your artist is aware of or what they see, that's the moment where you're going to get called, like Henry said, to the principal's office. Someone is going to the principal's office because they may not communicate, but chances are your artist knows exactly what's going on. Whether or not they're going to tell you every time they see maybe a thing, like Henry said, sometimes, you know, it can slide by, and other times it might be the thing that just sends them over to a place where you just don't want to be at the end of the night. Let's just say that. And, you know, the moment that you start thinking that your artist isn't paying attention, I mean, I've been surprised by, wow, I saw a whole section that seats were open. What happened there?
Yeah.
You know, again, the light hits the room a certain way. The artist is turning and sees a thing and has a question. You just don't know. So I guess that speaks to the holistic approach to how, you know, the visuals come around. It's not just what we see from the house looking forward. Sometimes it's also what you're seeing from the stage out to the house.
You know, as well, because we're talking festivals, what if you're not the headliner and you're playing before the sun goes down? How do you guys deal with this? How do we deal with sunlight?
Big floor package with blasters facing out, right?
How do we deal with this?
Well, honestly, like the implementation of LED in our lives has really helped that a lot, because you can point LED units at an audience and you can see color. So that has helped. I mean, because the thing is, like, once, like, park hands never work because they like point in one place. You can't just like point them up. I mean, it's been a bit like when you're an opening act on a festival, you don't have the same time that the headliner does, right? Like if you're like maybe second or third before opening, you might have that overnight slot to program. These days there's previs sites on the festival grounds where you just go in and you program in your previs suite, and then you take the file and you send it out front. So that's really helpful. But yeah, I don't know. Usually like if it's a daytime outdoor slot, like just have fun. Like, I don't know, like if you can punt, right? Like, I don't know, Dave, how would you handle it? It's been a while. I just always used to like white light and then hit in time with the music, right? Like,
yeah, it's just a punt. I mean, there's also weird things that can happen, even if you think you're getting like a decent slot, like it's dusk, whatever, the sun sets in a weird way, and then all of a sudden the entire stage is bathed in sunlight. So you're like, okay, great, I just have to wing this and hope for the best. We did one last year actually, or 2 years ago, which was exactly that. I did a 2-3 hour overnight slot, got the show looking amazing in the dark, and then the sunset, and I was like, oh, that was a complete waste of time. Great. But yeah, I mean, a lot of these stages nowadays as well, they build in like a decent amount of screen, or they build in when they're designed, they build in a decent amount of front facing like LED fixtures and things like that. So you can visually see some stuff. You're not going to see like nice beams in haze and all this wonderful stuff, but you can still do a show. Yeah.
I think a lot of it is when you're in those situations, like if you're putting a ton of pressure on yourself to make it your perfect show that you've done every other night, you can't do that to yourself, because when you do that, you end up, for me, like, and then maybe it's just the way I stress out about things, but if I try to put the pressure of making sure that my show looks exactly the way it's supposed to look during a nighttime performance, I'm going to fail, because I'm putting the conditions are not the same at all. And if you just go into it and say, I'm going to have fun today, and I'm going to just watch the audience and watch the artist and like listen to this music and enjoy myself and enjoy the show, you're going to end up having a better outcome anyway. And also like that, it's crazy to think this, but that energy of you doing it, like operating that way, does transmit to the artist. Because even though they're like however many 110 feet away or whatever, they can still feel if something is not right. So as long as you're just having fun and you're just like, yeah, man, that show was great, that crowd was awesome, like continue with that positive attitude and like never think that anything is wrong or anything is awry, you good.
Yeah. And, a good bit of advice that I learned pretty early on, first thing I do when I'm advancing a festival, especially if it's a smaller run or if it's a one-off, check that stage time and then check the sunset time. And that's going to inform every conversation that goes forward from there, because you can potentially, especially if it's a one-off, you can potentially save your artist a bunch of money if you're playing in the sunlight, and they have no need to go and rent a bunch of floor package that they would have otherwise. We kind of touched on this a little bit before, but I wanted to circle back around to artist feedback and creative, and for anyone who hasn't worked on a show, we'll let you behind the curtain a little bit. Very, very, very often, your artist is not coming off stage and popping bottles. They're taking out their phone, opening their laptop and looking at videos of the show that just happened on Instagram and wherever else. So how do you, and Sooner, you kind of touched on it before, but how do you approach that conversation with an artist when they're giving you feedback on an iPhone screen or an Android screen, where despite the fact that they are great and they can capture they're still not capturing the room and the feel of the room and the fidelity of what's happening, especially with detailed video or whatever?
Yeah, they're typically going backstage and looking at Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, whatever, TikTok, anything. And obviously camera phones, even if you have the latest, greatest Apple technology, it's not, the cameras aren't going to show the subtleties of the lighting. So I almost always design my shows these days for Instagram. I mean, it sucks. I don't like to say that, but it's true, because in the end, it's just about background, really, right? So like if you have all of your lighting way up, see, like you can't see my hands. If I have all my lighting up here, perfect example, and a camera is just getting this, then like what's going on in the background? Nothing. So I always try to put something in the back. And also because there's only like 10% guys of the audience sees it from straight down the middle. Like you got to think about the sides. So I always think about if you're way over there on side stage, like in line with the downstage edge, watching the show, what are you seeing? What's on the side, right? Like what are those lights hitting those people in the face, or are they creating a really nice background for their images, right? So thinking about all aspects 360 and making sure that those things look great. I have a really funny story, actually, if we have time, about Tommy Lee watching back a show.
Please.
Yeah, okay. So kids, don't know if you know a little group called Motley Crue.
Just because T. Lee is probably one of the most amusing humans on the planet. He's like a 6'5" version of Tigger. So we always want to know what he's up to.
Yes, we love Tommy Lee. He is a fantastic human being, guys. Love him to pieces. So the very first tour I did for them was in 2009. I didn't design it. I actually was the operator or the director, the lighting director, because I was in charge of making sure the notes happened. Tommy was really not happy with the lighting, the way it was programmed. So I had to spend the first 3 weeks or 4 weeks adjusting and fixing that. So every night, Tommy Lee would get we had a camcorder at front of house that would record the show. And every night that camcorder would go back to the dressing room and he would watch the show back. So every night, as soon as the show was done, I did have a systems tech. So that systems tech would pack up front of house and I would traipse my way back to Tommy's dressing room or to his bus. And I would sit down and I would watch the show with him and we would go through all the notes. And the next day I would have pages and pages and pages and pages of notes. And every day, like the production manager, Robert Long, was very good about making sure that Tommy understood that I only had enough time during the day to fix a certain amount of notes. So it was nice there was that communication and that backup. But you know, it was an amphitheater tour. So the sun was out, like doing notes in the middle of the day with the sun out, you know, unless there was a really good roof over the shed, you couldn't see the lights very well. So God, I hope it's okay I'm sharing this story. Yes, I've shared it. Okay. So I don't think he's not drinking anymore. He is sober. He's clean. He's awesome. Guys, just understand this. Tommy Lee is a fantastic human being. And he's clean and he's sober. But he used to drink Jägermeister and he was sponsored by Jägermeister. So I realized that if I went backstage to the dressing room and we did a little shot of Jägermeister, little one, before going into notes section, it was actually easier to communicate because we were suddenly in this like nice, happy, like, let's chat environment. And then we would go through notes. That's why I don't like Jägermeister anymore. I don't, not good.
But I mean, that story is great because it shows you finding a way to, you know, it's empathy. You're finding a way to connect with that person and understand the things on their level, even if it means doing a shot of Jägermeister before. So that's amazing. I'm just thinking actually, when you said about designing for Instagram, it struck me. I was on a tour that had a gag in one song where there was a giant inflatable moon, which was lit, and the singer from the band would grab it from where it was positioned at side stage and play with it. And I would say 96% of the photos of that entire arena tour were moon related because they were so captivating as shots, and all the photographers got those shots as well. And it missed so many details of so many beautiful details of the design. I wonder if you're ever, Dave, are you ever reticent to go over the top with gags for fear of it detracting from anything else? Is that no?
No,
I mean,
from the designer.
I think there's a few things. So I sit at a level where we don't do a lot of gags. Most of the time, anything we do has to be flyable, has to be something where we can take with us everywhere. I think also when you're designing for like an arena show, you're designing for a show that's, especially in smaller venues, you also have to be pretty good at hiding anything you want to do gag wise, because again, the camera phones come out. Most of the time people don't realize that they don't need the light on their camera phone, and then your entire stage is lit up anyway. So yeah, I don't know how to answer that one best.
I should also mention this for our students. Know that beyond the audience that are just taking pictures with their phone, any press that are there are typically only taking photos for the first 3 songs. It's very common for a tour's photo policy for those photographers to just be in the pit for the first 3. So a lot of the looks that you see from tours are from the first 15 minutes of the show. And so that's got to be very impactful, because that's where a lot of the big trades are getting their shots from as well. But yeah, so it's a lot to be aware of.
I was also going to just add that we, much the same as Sooner, we record every show as much as possible. So we record audio and we there's a camera at front of house that shoots every show. And it's also worthwhile noting that if you're going to do that with an artist, make sure you get permission from whoever the venue is or the festival or whatever, because I've had moments before definitely where like people have come to me and been like, what is this camera for? Get rid of it. You got a press pass? And I'm like, no. So you have to be, yes. Yeah, you have to watch that.
It's for archives.
Yeah, generally, as long as it's not going out on socials or whatever, they don't care. But
Dave, on to you for a question. Who hires you on a tour and how do you get hired?
It varies. So normally get put into contact with people either through word of mouth or through someone who's seen your work previously, but generally it will be a management company. I haven't really, that's not true. I've been employed directly by a production manager before, but most of the time it's management. Most of the time when you're dealing on a creative level, management either want to be involved quite heavily, or they want to just ensure that like the right team is assembled, and then they kind of back off sometimes. But yeah, generally it's management, and then yeah, you can kind of like assemble your team with everyone else.
Sooner, do you have anything to add to that?
It's totally the same. It's usually management, or if there's like a creative director I've worked with in the past and they have a new artist, they need a lighting designer, then they'll call me in to help, or even help with the production design. Mm-hmm. Totally the same.
Mark?
Yeah. Moving along, as we make our way towards questions, is there any iconic designs that influenced y'all, you personally, and y'all's come up in your design? Anything that, like, influences in your style? I can start with Dave and work over to Sooner.
Different projects have different styles, but I think some of the ones that I love recently, the 1975, they've done a couple of incredible shows, incredible tour designs. And Tobias looks after a lot of their stuff, and what they achieve is phenomenal. I love it. And also Alt J, it's a shame that show's not out anymore, because I would go and see it again and again and again. And they did this crazy thing with like all these pixel tubes, and they were actually playing a lot with 3D space within like what they were doing with the pixel tubes and stuff. Sometimes using them as lighting, sometimes using them as video. Phenomenal. Absolutely incredible.
Sooner, what influenced you? And tell us a little bit about some of your favorite shows.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going old school. So the first show I ever saw was Smashing Pumpkins' Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness Tour. And that's where I was like, I want to do this. And that was Lawrence Upton was the lighting designer. I then watched, I don't even remember, was this like Laserdisc or something? Was Laserdisc a thing to watch video on, guys? Was it? Yeah. I think I watched like Pink Floyd Pulse Tour was the epitome of amazingness in cueing and theatricality with lighting and scenic elements and everything. Like that tour is the top one for me in life. More recently, 9 Inch Nails 2001 Fragile, which had this really incredible like LED, like clear see-through LED screen. And that Alt J show, I mean, hands down, like incredible. It's my buddies, Jackson and Jeremy.
That that 9 Inch Nails see-through LED screen for me was like, what are wow, whoa. And that he could control where, for anyone who didn't see it, there was an LED screen that came down and downstage in front of the talent, and the talent was able to control, for example, if there was a whole screen of white noise and feedback, he could come in and with a wash of his hand, make a swoosh of clarity. So he could decide where you could see him by his movement. That was the end for me. That was the end for me.
I got to geek out and see that at the Forum before it went on tour. It was a friends and family.
I was at the friends and family.
There was only
also,
dude, there was maybe 50 people on the floor at the Forum watching it. And Trent came out at first and was like, we're going to try a bunch of stuff. Some of this may not make it on tour, but let's start and see how it goes. And it was one of the most beautiful performances ever. Our students should definitely look that up and watch it on YouTube. Anything 9 Inch Nails, actually. They've been one of those bands that really push the limits and think outside the box.
I want to shout out Sigur Rós.
Oh yeah,
who are always incredible. And they're the last tour I saw of theirs, they did some incredible 3D. It was like they were in a giant cage of video and lighting. It was beautiful.
Can I add one more? Daft Punk, when they did, so that was like a big influence for the way a lot of EDM went, and like how the whole translation of electronic music onto stage, especially with DJs and things, happened. And when there's like the videos out there of their Coachella set, it was insane. That was so cool. It's the first time that they really kind of like used all these like little pixel tubes and layers of screen and all this stuff. It was awesome.
It was such an iconic performance that I feel like changed the path of design and Coachella and the way that we approach festivals. Does something as iconic as the Daft Punk pyramid, in your minds as designers, do you guys always try to create something that is going to be that iconic, or do you not know? Because there's so many iconic designs out there that everybody remembers. Do you know that it's going to be that way when you're designing it? Are you trying to find that, or does that something just naturally comes out of the process?
I've had artists actually ask for it. In fact, I've got one right now. It's asking for it. But it really, I mean, it depends. It's just like reading that artist again, right? So like some shows you can get by with subtlety. It doesn't need to be like the latest, greatest, most amazing thing never been done before. And then there's artists that they need to innovate because that's part of their story. So I think it's just.
I think some artists also don't want it. They don't want a loud and proud, like in your face show. They want it to be really subtle. I work with an artist at the moment, and his entire aesthetic is all kind of like the 90s VHS. Like he really doesn't want in your face iconic stuff. He just wants it to be subtle. And I think a lot of the time as well, people sometimes forget that like when you're designing a show for an artist and a band, like people come to see the band. Like, yes, it's grown. Yes, it's elaborate now. People are doing trucks and trucks and trucks of production, but there's still a lot of artists out there that will just tell you, I don't want anything big. And you're like, okay, well, how do we make that work? There's still an expectation as well. Like if you go and do a headline Coachella slot or something like that, like you need to take a show. It's not, you can't just go in there and be really understated. And
minimalism also has a process and an aesthetic in a show, because
it's kind of an art to design a show that's minimal on a big scale, because that can be really complicated in itself.
We had an interesting question for you guys from one of our YouTube viewers, Madison, who asks, what kinds of mistakes can be made behind the lighting booth board or behind the board? And what are some huge no-nos to keep in mind? Dave, let's go to you first and then to Sooner on that one. The no-nos, mistakes and no-nos.
Okay. A few things. One,
you have an impish grin, so I know you have one.
I have a few. Definitely an experience-based business. So
for sure.
First is key light on any show. I've done shows before as well where we haven't had any spot ops. We haven't had like the show won't allow you to just like create a wash across the stage. So as the artist moves around, they're always covered, you know. So I've done shows before where we like program preset positions, and then throughout the show you're just like hitting a button and watching this artist bounce around and trying to keep up with them. And yeah, I hate it. But it happens, and artists really notice if that doesn't happen. So really you're trying to like keep them happy all the time. You're trying to keep your timing on point. And weirdly, like kind of we were saying before, artists always know as well if your timing is off. They know their music, and sometimes you can be in a position where there's like delays with audio or weird things with audio going on. So they're hearing something at a completely different time to what you're seeing it out live. And that can be interesting. That's a challenge in itself. So it's kind of like reassuring them that no, everything was fine. Everything was good. Other than that, never have a drink on the console. I see so many people who try to be cocky and clever, and they'll put a can or something on a desk and it all goes horribly wrong. Yeah. Pay attention as well at front of house. A lot can happen. Like even in the middle of a show, you can have things that you're dealing with that aren't the show. Like, for example, at festivals, people are throwing the drinks and stuff like that. And you just have to be on point, on game, have towels next to you, have something next to you that you can keep your show going with. Most of the time we run with 2 consoles too. So you'll have a main and a backup. But I've definitely been there where someone's thrown a pint of beer or something at me, and it's fun.
Sooner, what do you got?
I mean, everything Dave says. I always made my mistakes when my head wasn't completely in the game. And I mean, I think at one point, I did one show tour where I had been awake for 48 straight hours because of work, and I accidentally turned the house lights off early. The artist was not ready to go on stage. I accidentally turned them off. I had to put them back on really quickly. But that all the audience sold out arena freak out audience members, like, you know, and it was because I hadn't gotten enough sleep, and it was really, really loud and I couldn't hear anything. And I somehow must have thought somebody said house lights go. I was like, okay, and like hit the button. Yeah. So most of it's just like head in the game, and then being prepared. You know, if you don't have time to prepare your show file because you're opening act on a festival, you can prepare by sitting for an hour in a bus with a set list and like just write down your thoughts. And you don't have to read those thoughts like a script, but as long as you're just like writing them down and thinking them through in your brain before you get out to front of house, you at least have a roadmap in your brain that you can kind of go by. So preparedness is a big one.
Love it. Thank you.
We have a lot of great questions from our students here on Zoom as well. We have a question from Corrine Olgwin. What are some things you wish you knew early in your career and as a touring LD? Thank you. We can start with Sooner. Work our way over to David.
What are some of the things we knew early? I think one of the things that I like when my very first started in the industry, and I wasn't even touring, I was a tech and interning for that company. I think I just didn't quite realize how much of an identity and a lifestyle this job is. Like, this isn't just like a job that you can just show up to and just like, my stomach hurts, I want to go home. Like, you're the only person that does this job on the tour, guys. Like, there's nobody else that does what you're doing. There's not like a stand-in that's like, okay, this guy's out, let's bring this person in. Like, that doesn't happen. No big hook, right? It's very much like you have to remember that these people are paying you to do a job that you are very highly skilled at, very highly trained at, and it's a very specific skill set that you've gained over a certain amount of time. And there's not really, like, in order to get another person in there that could potentially fill your shoes, they're going to have to fly them in from another location on the planet and put them in a hotel or whatever. So just calling in sick doesn't work. I didn't quite understand the level of commitment and dedication. when I did figure it out, I was like, well, this is fine by me. I'm totally cool with this in my life anyway. In fact, my husband also works in the industry. He works for a staging company. So I think Dave knows him actually. Dave's been talking to him recently. Yeah, he works for Gallagher.
We're actually doing a project at the moment. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. He was like, tell Dave I said hi. So hi. So anyway, yeah, I think that's the big thing that I wish I had known a little bit more about when I started. Nothing technical, unfortunately.
And Dave, on to you.
Workarounds. I mean, a lot of them come from experience, but especially when you're programming and you're working on switching between festivals and multiple venues and different rigs all the time and things, I think I wish someone had taught me or told me like how to structure show files, how to structure things so that you can easily translate from one thing to another. It's something that you definitely have to learn fast as you experience all of these different venues, and it can make or break you. Like, sorry, a lot of traffic outside. Yeah, being organized, as soon as I said it, is another big thing. Yeah.
No, I would say I just wanted to add to that support to learning about, and we're talking lighting department as a tour manager or production manager, learning early on to support your LDs when they're doing stuff like the overnight load-ins or overnight programming. You get to go back to the hotel and go to bed. They are going to stay up so freaking late. And so if they need anything like coffee or Red Bull or some wine or some Reese's Pieces, you get that for them. You go ahead and buy whatever they need because they're going to make your show beautiful. And it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen instantly. It happens overnight for them. So take care of your crew that are working late on those hours. I think that's
I want to reach through the screen and hug you for that, because there's so many people that don't understand, and they actually, like, I can't tell you how many production managers are just like, well, all you're doing is just sitting at that board, like programming right now anyway. So what do you really, and I'm just like, yeah, but I'm sleeping 4 hours a night.
Yeah, perhaps, I mean, we always try to leave some food, a ride home, and a contact should anything not go well, because chances they're going to be out there in the middle of a field overnight in some remote place that is generally, or in an arena that's empty, save for potentially maybe a security guard who's uninvolved, and perhaps you want to leave them some sustenance and some refreshment and a way home, and a lot of people don't think about the overnighters. They're like, come in here, do your gig. Yeah, I'll be fine. Just make sure that they're taken care of too.
Yeah, when I started with Major Laser, I got to front of house one day, and this like runner appeared and sort of said, hey, here's your front of house basket. And I was like, wow, what is this luxury that I've just, it's like Red Bull and snacks, and it's all those things that matter when you're there as well. Like sometimes with overnights, the crazy thing is that most of the festival crew have gone home. So you'll get left with like a minder or whatever who can just kind of like help you. But they can turn into long nights really quick if something's wrong, because you don't have all of those people there to help you. So
how many sunrises do you think you've seen in your life, Dave?
A lot. Yeah, a lot, especially when you're doing like during shows as well, EDCs or something, when they don't finish till 7, 8 a.m. and you're like, oh boy.
All right, last one, guys. And thank you for being so giving with your time today. We really appreciate that. Last one's from Stephanie. Do you have any advice for learning about lighting? Resources where you can educate yourself on it, or where can you actually get board time?
I think like one of the big things, if you can get in touch with like a local lighting vendor, I think that's probably your best bet. And also just like, I mean, if you're a stagehand in a venue, you ask the right questions, and you, like I said, read the room, like make sure you're not asking the questions at the wrong time when somebody's in the middle of, doing something super important. But I mean, I think the easiest way is just to try to get in touch with a lighting vendor and talk to them and say, hey, this is a career choice I'm really interested in. Is there a way that I can come in and just like talk to your employees, or like, how can I jump in and like look at the gear or look at the equipment or even play with it? I will say this, like, I do think it's important. Don't discredit, like, if you're I mean, it's really, really fun to run a lighting console and to program a lighting console and to design lights. It's so much fun. It really is enjoyable. But don't discredit the stuff that maybe doesn't seem in as a glamorous, right? Like, don't discredit the techs, don't discredit the crew chiefs, don't discredit the dimmer techs. Like, they are the nuts and bolts of your lighting system. And that is a super high tech job that is really, really interesting and amazing as well. So remember that that's an important thing to learn. And you might, if you start off at a local vendor, you might not start off learning the console. You're probably going to start off doing the technical stuff in the shop. And that's okay, because you're learning the tools of your trade and you're learning the ins and outs of how the lighting world works. It's not just, if you go up and you just sit behind the console, it's nothing better than just sitting behind a computer and just making pretty things on, so.
That's a very good point that I wanted to say that, you know what, in the whole scheme of the lighting department, there's a lot of people in this industry that don't want to be designers, that don't want to be in that hot seat, and they are just incredible at being the lighting crew chief. And that is where they want to shine, because they are in charge. They have the great leadership skills, they're organized, they can articulate how to build the lighting rig, whatever it is. So if you're interested in getting into lighting, it's not like you're trying to work your way up to design. You're going to see all these other titles that we discussed where you can really shine in that role. And maybe you're like, this is it for me. I'm going to be the lighting crew chief, or I'm going to be an L2 because I want to handle the projection or video stuff that, you want to get into other areas. But there's a lot of options within the lighting department. So guys, thank you so much. This has been...
And just to add before we wrap on that, Henry, to that point, the lighting crew chief is so crucial to the day, because the rig's got to get in the air on time. If the lighting rig does not go up, quickly and on time, that's nobody else can go up behind it unless the rig is in the air. If you come out and the lights are still on the ground and it's noon, we got a problem.
Yep. Under the stage manager and the rigger, that's one of my top 3 that need to be on the ground first thing always. Yep. And so it's there's a lot of places that you can go within the lighting department. So to our students, I hope you've learned a lot. And if you enjoyed this, then share it with some friends that are interested in lighting. And I guess sooner, David and Shaheem couldn't join us, but he's incredible as well. Thank you for being here and sharing your time. Our students love it. They're going off in the chat. So Mark, you want to close us out?
Yeah. Sooner, Dave, thank you so much. This was an incredible topic conversation. We love our Spotlight series to shine a light on the rock stars that make our shows come to life. For all of our students, we'll be back next Wednesday. Our spring semester part 2 is rolling.
Monday.
Oh, Monday. I'm sorry. What did I say?
Wednesday.
Sorry.
Okay.
Not on Wednesday.
Pandemic. We don't know the days of the week. It's okay.
Every Monday, same time, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. We'll post on our socials this week. Please follow us on all of our social platforms, including YouTube, Instagram, all that good stuff. And if you have any questions, reach out to us. But until then, have a great week, and we'll see you next week on